Hello, guys. This is Mr. Cole coming to you live from my apartment as we go over and continue to learn about Vietnam. Want to give a shout out. I'm recording this on Friday, but want to give a shout out to Allison and Aubrey, the first two people from first period to get that done. Great job. Don't worry if you think the tornado chart is you know, not valid still. It is. I'll keep up and see which class does the most work, and we will add tornadoes for all this. So we'll end up seeing. We might have to wait to the pizza party till we get back next school year, but don't worry, tornadoes are still being counted as we go through. So look forward to that. So a couple of people from first period off to a really great start. Nice job. All right, today as we go through and continue our learning about Vietnam. Today we're going to talk about more of the American buildup and American involvement in Vietnam. So, reminder, okay, Vietnam has been divided into North Vietnam and South Vietnam, with North being the communist side and South being the nationalist side, the not communist side. But with that, the war's already started, basically, before America's even involved, right? The North Vietnamese fighting a war against South Vietnam, but they're also fighting a guerrilla war led by the Viet Cong, where the Viet Cong had infiltrated or were people in the South who wanted to live under communism, or there were communists in the South. So they formed this guerrilla army to lead ambushes and surprise attacks on the Diem government. Now, if you remember, Diem was a super corrupt leader who America had been supporting because he was not communist. Well, with that, today, after Diem's been overthrown and Diem has been killed, I want you to see how our military gets very heavily involved. So, by this point, okay, leading up from President Eisenhower through President Kennedy, the United States military had served as what they called advisors to South Vietnam. And I need you to add that. I think I forgot to have that in your notes. We sent tens of thousands of troops to South Vietnam over the course of a decade. I believe the very first soldiers in South Vietnam were there in the late 1940s, early 1950s. By now, we're in the 1960s. And American military members go over there to try to basically train the South Vietnamese army and the South Vietnamese government to fight the war against the North. The idea was to have the South fight the battle themselves, right? Not have America have to fight it. You can see that we had sent tens of thousands of troops. I mean, I know it doesn't look that impressive right here, but still, this is almost 20,000, 30,000 troops that are being sent to serve as what we called, quote unquote, advisors. But as the war between the North and South continued to grow more and more, we started having our advisors do a lot more and more. It went away from just training the South Vietnamese to actually helping the South Vietnamese carry out missions, or in some areas actually having the United States, carry out our own missions into North Vietnam. Now, by the time that President Lyndon B. Johnson takes over after Kennedy's assassination, we have over 20,000, 30,000 troops that are in Vietnam. Okay, and the President Johnson, going through an election only 1 year after taking over as president, was accused of being kind of soft on communism, that he was allowing the North Vietnamese to kind of basically spread communism into the South. And we know that in the 1950s and 60s, if there's one thing you don't want to be called, it's being called soft on communism. So President Johnson starts to ramp up the military involvement in Vietnam. And he begins to have our ships actually patrolling in the North Vietnamese area. Okay? Now with that, on August 4th, 1964, there were reports that one of our ships had been attacked in what was called the Gulf of Tonkin. Now, the Gulf of Tonkin is up here. Okay, we had all sorts of ships that were there in North Vietnam. Okay, now the ships were attacked. One ship was attacked. No damage. Nobody was killed. But the ship had been fired at. And then a couple of days later, the Johnson administration said a second ship had been fired at by North Vietnam. Now, the Johnson administration, wanting to find a way to actually get full military involvement in the war, decides to use this as their moment, this Tonkin Gulf incident, which I have a picture of right there, as the way to actually begin the full escalation of military involvement in Vietnam, away from just our advisor rules. So Johnson goes to Congress with what is called the Tonkin Gulf Resolution. It basically gave the president any military powers they want in Vietnam. It's essentially a declaration of war, although it's not. We actually will never actually declare war on Vietnam. Basically, Congress just hands over the president and says, President, you do what you want in Vietnam with the war. Okay? Now, what Lyndon B. Johnson did not tell the American people and American Congress was that those ships were not innocent bystanders in the Tonkin Gulf. Those ships had been used to launch secret raids or intelligence gathering missions or secret missions into North Vietnam. And North Vietnam was simply responding to our actions. But he does not tell them that. He also does not tell them that the second ship that was attacked never actually was. We know today that that was a lie. The second ship was never attacked. But with that, Johnson uses, hey, we were attacked. It was our ships that were hurt. We need to go to war now. You will think, if you remember back to the Spanish-American War, where we put our ships down in Havana, Cuba, and the USS Maine blew up, think very, very similar, where it's like sketchy evidence that this happened, but boom, the president jumps on it, and we're going. In fact, to show you that, the actual resolution itself had been written months before the attack ever happened. So the Johnson administration was just waiting for a reason to go to war. But with this, since Congress gave President Johnson the ability, now American troops begin a full-scale bombing of North Vietnam, and we begin a full-on beginning of what we in America call the Vietnam War. You can see here at the end of 1964, we had about 20,000, 30,000 advisors. You can see by the following year, now those are true soldiers, over 200,000 getting sent to Vietnam, and that number is going to grow. Our goal there is very simple. Defend South Vietnam from communism, right? Just like it was in the Korean War, very, very similar, okay? So a little bit shorter video today. Great job to all those folks, and we'll see who's leading. I'll give an update in our tornado chart and see how we're doing. All righty, see you guys.